What is the damage that has been sustained because of colonial rule and apartheid?
Whew. Let's go back to, I guess, when you look at colonialism and when it was finally just organized in a way that we would then have the Africa that we have today. Mm-hmm. For Africa, I'll take it back to the Berlin Conference. That was held from November of 1884 to February of 1885. As you know, most people don't realize that the European nations were just haphazardly going into Africa and just stealing from the local people, and pretty soon they started stealing. The British would steal from the French, and the French would steal from the Spaniards, and pretty soon they were fighting each other. So the then Chancellor of Germany, Bismarck, in his efforts to prevent the European war on the African soil, he reached out to his sidekick, King Leopold of Belgium. Mm-hmm. And at that time, as you know, Belgium, King Leopold was wreaking havoc in the Congo. People are not aware that over 75% of the Congolese population was killed by Leopold. He actually claimed Congo was his own personal country. He owned it individually, not as Belgium. So you call Leopold and say, hey, we got a problem here. Can we come together and see if we can organize the manner in which we're going to loot from these people? So that's really how Berlin Conference was called together. So they brought all the countries that were making this mad rush into Africa so they could organize how they were looting the continent. So really, the Berlin Conference was not called for in order to make Africa better, but rather to see to it that they organize themselves so they can effectively exploit the Africans and also make sure that the continent and its people are forever defeated and dominated.
Does the looting go on today?
Oh, yes. The looting continues, but it has put on different clothes. Now, there's something else they did during the Berlin Conference. Because remember, after they had traveled around the continent, found some of the most powerful kingdoms with well-established educational and religious systems. I mean, the African people are just resilient. When you get to know the Africans, you understand the African spirit. And they knew that if they continued the same way they were going, they would never defeat the Africans. So they set in place a system of colonization and making the Africans believe that everything that was African was bad and everything that was European, particularly British and English, was better. So the seed of divide and conquer was also sown during the Berlin Conference. And they knew, just give it a generation or less, these people, not only are they going to be so divided, because they chopped us up into these small economies that really could never survive on their own. You take a country like Equatorial Guinea, Central African Republic, Malawi, Rwanda, Burundi, you know, they're economies that even if they struggle and begin to do better on their own, if the master decides you're becoming too smart, they're very easy to destabilize. Wow. And that's exactly what has been going on in our Africa. So Berlin Conference, people don't realize it was designed to see to it that the Africans are forever defeated. So for those who turn around and say, but Ambassador, don't talk about the Berlin Conference, it was a long time ago. And I'll say, as long as we have a country called Malawi, a country called Zimbabwe, a country called Central African Republic, all the African countries really for that matter, Berlin Conference is alive and well. Because that which they set out to do 123, 24 years ago, it's still in place. Nothing has changed. So how can they say Berlin Conference is a thing of history, don't talk about it? No, what's really sad and what should disgust the world is to say this policy was put in place 123 years ago and it is still in place and nothing has changed. But what's really worse is when you look at what France did to the Francophone countries in 1958, when they were living, quote unquote, leaving the continent. They gave the Francophone countries two choices. You can be independent with some affiliations to France, or you can be independent with no affiliations to France. Well, Guinea and Mali said, we're done with you, France. goodbye, leave us alone. That's how we had the first ever known union of any African states. They went into those two countries, took everything that they thought they had brought to them. History tells us they even took the last cup, teaspoon, chair, and proceeded to pour concrete into the sewage pipes, completely devastating the two economies, simply because they refused to be affiliated to France. But what they, and also the Sékou Touré, then president of Guinea at that time, he looked at the pact that France was making the Francophone countries sign. It was called the Pact for the Continuation of Colonization. He refused to sign it.